Welcome to the Trash Cats Trash Cast. I'm Richard.
I'm Steven.
Today we're playing some Russian Roulette.
Oof.
We're going to cover some of the history and psychology of Russian Roulette, as well as go through a research paper written by medical examiners and take a look at their findings. But first, Steven, how was your week?
It's been okay. This is going to be a pretty interesting one. This paper is wild. Some gnarly stuff. Very excited to take a look at it. My week's been just kind of normal. Been trying to grind on some art and stuff, so it's just been slow progress. Just got over COVID. Didn't slow me down too bad, but definitely was not fun. But feeling better, kind of just getting back in the grind, you know?
Yeah. So we had
What about you? I emailed you COVID. And
yeah, you emailed me the virus.
So how's your week going, buddy?
It's been better. I've had better weeks. On Monday, I worked all week with an employee or the coworker, and
some loser.
Nah, it wasn't their fault. They just weren't feeling that good, and it's one of those, especially in the food industry. It's like, are you like sick? And they're like, no, I just don't feel good.
It's so
like,
hard
right.
to know.
And then the next day, they're like, I have a fever of 101, and I just tested positive for COVID. And it's like, oh, cool.
Just gave you a plague that may kill everyone you love.
So yeah, I have the COVID.
That sucks,
and today it wasn't even that bad. Like yesterday and the day before, it was just like I was tired and I just felt weak and shitty. Today I woke up and I couldn't get out of bed. I was able to like climb out, but everything hurt, and I've had a low-grade fever all day long. So that's been cool. I actually had a dream at one point. I fell asleep, and I had a dream that I was late for work. So I woke up, and I was like, fuck, I got to get ready to go to work. And then I saw the medications and stuff on my table, and I remembered, oh, wait, no, I'm sick.
I don't have to go to work. I'm dying.
I'm dying.
And yet, we're somehow recording a podcast. So congratulations to us.
Yeah, we're real smart for this one.
We made it through 2 separate COVID infections to get these episodes out. We're hard to kill.
Where's our iHeartRadio award for recording under extreme circumstances, or I don't know, there's something.
Someday we'll be remembered.
They'll look back at us, and what will they remember? How much denim you got on.
Those boys had a lot of denim.
They love trash and denim. and Wet Willie's whistles.
Well, speaking of trash, you got any honorable mentions?
I got nothing.
All right, these are a couple cool trashy ones. So
shouts out to ibuprofen.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff right there.
One of the real ones out here.
So we're going to briefly look at a couple artists because we got a lot to cover today. So the first link is for an artist, Ben Tolman. He's on Instagram at BenTolman. And I picked him out because he reminded me of something I thought you'd like.
Oh, yeah.
He's almost a modern Escher-esque kind of style.
He's got it's a cool pen and ink style. There's a lot of
and graphite too.
Okay, I've only seen some of the ink ones out here.
I may be mistaken. I thought I did both. It looks like mostly ink.
The ink work I'm really into. I started doing ink stuff myself when I was younger as a thing to like challenge myself because it's so less forgiving than pencils.
Mm-hmm.
And to get some of the accuracy and the textures he's getting.
Very fine craftsmanship.
Right. Super cool.
What I really like about him, as you scroll through his page, I really like the narratives, the stories. That a lot of it's instead of, I feel like, you know, when Escher does the infinite stairwells and things like that, it's that zoomed out scope. But Ben Tolman instead kind of does like an urban scene, like outside of a club or an alleyway or some neighborhood buildings, kind of zoomed out at those high angles, but you can see all of the characters, almost Where's Waldo style. Like you can see all their clothing. You can see this narrative storytelling of the interactions. He was just recently featured by High Fructose, the art magazine.
Yeah.
And they had a really good video of one of his pieces where in video form, it feels like you're following the characters through a story. And it was just really cool. You know, I really like the pieces like that where you can get this intimate connection with all the different characters in the piece itself.
Yeah, I guess the emotions that you can get out of a black and white, drawing. And there are patches where, having played with pens and inks and stuff, you can see where there's only so many things you can do with it to like get these different textures and
but it still holds that emotional tonality in there.
Right. Yeah.
Check. Yeah. I just sent you a link. This was my introduction to him, but I thought you would really like this video. I was having trouble finding it earlier, but it's really, really cool. Such depth too. Great perspective, depth, character arc, storytelling.
I love doing people with pen and ink. I love doing like gesture sketches. One of the cooler things I feel like I ever did in my life was when I lived in Toronto, and I would go downtown to the Yonge and Dundas Square, and I would just sit there on the corner and draw people as they were like waiting for the walk light, or as they were
perving and girding, baby.
Yeah, but just to try to like, how quickly can I get this person's essence down? And then it got to a point where it was like, how quickly can I get... Oh, wow, the end of that video escalated pretty quick.
Yeah. How cool is that? Because zoomed out in a static format, it's amazing too, because you kind of have to discover. It's like, where's Waldo, I Spy? You got to like follow the different characters and discover different parts of it. But in video, it felt like a kind of like an A to B narrative in a way.
Yeah.
It had an arc.
Yeah, definitely like this artist a lot. This is really cool.
Yeah, I just not enough stuff like this that's kind of classic in its approach, but innovative in its follow through. So check him out, Ben Tolman on Instagram. This next one, so I wrote a little note next to this guy. To me, this is what I consider an investment artist. And what I mean by that is I think a lot of their work is amazing. Some of it, not too crazy on. But this is an artist, just since I've followed them, they've grown a lot. But I don't really care about that too much. They're still have a relatively small following. But their work is constantly evolving. And I think there is a pretty special mind behind the creator. So this artist is... I'm going to butcher it. It's Frank Bezacon?
Yeah, that's how I would say it. Bezacon.
And his description is, I create dark art mixing body horror, mythologies, and pagan rites, member of the Dark Art Society. Now, typically, when I see an artist description that mentions dark arts or pagan rites, I'm all the way out. I can't do it. Like, those are things that probably people would think I'm into, but I'm not into. But he approaches this so well. And I do like the part a lot. Mixing body horror. This is a 3D artist, but the final versions of his work look like just such interesting old paintings, but they're still so crisp. And he shows in most of the posts how it goes from 3D to this 2D format. And so much of it is like mutated butchered bodies in a sculpture form. He has a little bit of a Sikorski vibe to him in these idols.
Yeah, the movement and like part of it's the body horror thing, but like the hands they're very, gesturetive. They show emotion and feeling. It's all dynamic. It's not stoic. There's power behind, there's so much emotion and like dynamic movement.
Yes.
In all of these pieces.
He reminds me of, I forget his name, the Basinski, whatever it is, the nightmare artist, but in a modern digital form. But I'm a digital artist, and I dislike most digital art. This is a rare example for me of a digital artist. I really like how I perceive their mind, and I like most of his work, but I think he is going to do very special things. I think he'll be someone very successful. So that's Frank Bezacon, but he's on Instagram at FRANCKB.art. Check him out. We're lazy about posting stuff, but check him out. We'll try to post links and stuff later because a couple really cool artists.
Yeah, wow. There's so much of this work is just it's gross in a good way.
Yeah, it's a great, terrible, majestic, mutilated beauty. Yeah. You ready to load a couple bullets? I guess one bullet into the chamber and give it a spin. That's all it takes.
I'm about ready at this point.
I guess lastly, we should thank the medical examiners. Do you want to read these? These are the people who wrote our paper today. It was a really cool thing to work off. We're going to get into looking at that in a little bit. We're going to start with history and psychology, but definitely want to thank the writers of this paper.
Lisa B.E. Shields, M.D.
Shouts out Lisa.
Shouts out to Lisa. John C. Hunsacker III,
My
M.D.
boy.
J.D. and Donna M. Stewart, M.D.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Those the homies. No, they did really good work, so it's going to be cool to look at. We're going to start with some history, though. Russian Roulette is a potentially lethal game of chance in which a player places a single round into a revolver, spins the cylinder, places the muzzle against the head or body, the opponent or themselves, and pulls the trigger. If the loaded chamber aligns with the barrel, the weapon will fire, killing or severely injuring the player.
Russian refers to the supposed country of origin, and roulette to the element of risk-taking and spinning of the revolver cylinder, similar to a roulette wheel.
There are two possible initial origins to the term. Both have Russian roots.
The first trace of Russian roulette can be found in the short story The Fatalist, which was written in 1840 and was part of a collection, A Hero of Our Time, by Mikhail Lermontov, a Russian poet and writer. In the story, which is set in a Cossack village, the protagonist, Grigory,
our boy Griggs.
Poor Griggs. Grigory Alexandrovich Pekarin. Jesus Christ.
Our boy Grigory Alexandrovich Pekarin.
You set me up for failure. The protagonist claims that there is no predestination and proposes a bet in order to prove it, emptying about 20 gold pieces onto the table. A lieutenant of the Dragoons of the Tsar, Vulik, a man of Serbian origins with a passion for gambling, accepts the challenge and randomly takes one of a number of pistols of various calibers from its nail, cocks it, and pours gunpowder into the pan. Nobody knows if the pistol is loaded or not, and Vulik asks,
"Gentlemen, who will pay 20 gold pieces for me?"
Putting the muzzle of the pistol to his forehead. He then asks Grigory to throw a card in the air, and when this card touches the ground, he pulls the trigger. The weapon fails to fire, but when Vulik cocks the pistol again and aims it at a service cap hanging over the window, a shot rings out and smoke fills the room.
So it's a bit different than our modern conception of Russian roulette, but it kind of shows where the idea of taking a chance with a revolver starts. And then alternatively, the term Russian roulette was possibly first used in the 1937 short story of the same name, which is crazy, by George Surdez, The passage reads,
"Did you ever hear of Russian roulette? When I said I had not, he told me all about it. When he was with the Russian army in Romania around 1917, and things were cracking up, so that their officers felt that they were not only losing prestige, money, family, and country, but were also being dishonored before their colleagues of the Allied armies. Some officer would suddenly pull out his revolver anywhere, at the table, in a cafe, in a gathering of friends, remove a cartridge from the cylinder, spin the cylinder, snap it back in place, put it to his head and pull the trigger. There were 5 chances to 1 that the hammer would set off a live cartridge and blow his brains all over the place."
I like how that dude wrote. He's got a very punchy style.
Yeah.
I like it.
And that's also very different from that's some hardcore fucking Russian roulette right there. That's 5 to 1 instead of 1 to 5.
I don't like those odds.
No, those are bad odds. I mean, it's always bad odds, but that's rough.
Yeah. So now that we got some of the basics, let's take a look at this 2008 research paper titled Russian Roulette and Risk-Taking Behavior. This is just one look at the topic from medical examiners in Kentucky, and we're not going to read the whole thing, but it offers some good insight, and if the topic interests you, definitely encourage you to take a look at doing some further research yourself. We also want to note that our commentary definitely is going to get intermingled at times, so if you hear something very stupid, just assume it was us and not them.
Yeah, that's fair.
So this is the official Trash Cats review of the research paper, Russian Roulette and Risk-Taking Behavior. Kick us off.
So, interestingly, and I thought this was not interesting in the way that, I was surprised by it, but the paper states the majority of victims are men younger than 30 years who, in the presence of others, were under the influence of alcohol and other drugs. I think I could have guessed that anyways, especially just with how the media portrays Russian roulette to be anyhow. Or, whenever you see people playing it, it's just a bunch of, dudes that look like they're, having a pissing contest and need to prove something to each other.
Yeah, in my mind, it's so linked to suicide, though. I kind of overlooked how much of a social element there is, that the majority of the victims would be around other people, which is kind of freaky. I kind of underestimated that. It definitely makes sense to me that it's mostly younger males, but...
Yeah, I never really considered that you could play Russian roulette by yourself. It wasn't like really it's a game. That's the point. That's the part where, it's a social thing. Otherwise, you're just shooting yourself in the head.
Yeah, but
maybe.
Here's the thing, though, is all the people that did play by themselves, there's no way to know, too.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's a lot of drunk or fucked up people who spun a gun to their head and no one knew if it was a suicide or they were playing some dark game, I guess they might be able to guess if, there's only one, bullet in the chamber. And there's a lot of factors on psychological analysis after the fact, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But starting it off, so this research paper is based off a 10-year study from 1993 to 2002. Like we mentioned, it's in Kentucky. It's a retrospective review of self-inflicted gunshot wounds of the head, among which we called and paid special attention to cases of Russian roulette at the medical examiner's office in Kentucky. Of the 24 incidents of Russian roulette, so it's 24 incidents over 10 years, that's still 24 people. That's not a ton of cases. That's a pretty small amount of cases for a give or take a decade, right?
Yeah.
So 24 cases in Kentucky of Russian roulette over 10 years. The majority of the victims were white, 79.2%, and all of them were men between the ages of 14 and 47, with a mean age or average of 24.8 years. Compared with other cephalic, boom, headshot. Cephalic is the head. Compared with other cephalic firearm suicides, the subjects engaging in Russian roulette were significantly more likely to have elevated blood levels of alcohol, at least 0.1% or higher, along with various drugs detected in urine. Although the presumed intent of the risky act is to survive, Russian roulette is deemed to be suicide, which is based on a comprehensive understanding of the inherently deliberate, volitional actions of the decedent.
Risk-taking behaviors range from high-risk sports, such as parachuting, scuba diving, and bungee jumping, to driving under the influence, drug and alcohol abuse, gambling, unprotected sex, and the lack of auto seatbelt use.
All that fun stuff.
Yeah, it's basically just a good-ass time.
Basic rules to live your life by, basically.
Drive under the influence, abuse alcohol and drugs, gamble, and have unprotected sex.
All while wearing a condom.
Yeah.
Without wearing a condom. God damn it. Just driving around with my condom on. Flapping in the wind.
Just in case, you know?
Gotta be prepared. Predisposing factors for risk-taking behavior include low self-esteem, lack of parental supervision, and school failure. Basically all the things that contribute to having a shitty life. Basic crime stats, all that shit where you come from a rough place, your life's rough, you're most likely to live a higher risk lifestyle.
Precipitating factors consist of social pressure, family discord, peer initiation of risky behavior, sexual activity, and substance abuse.
All the fun stuff. Russian roulette represents a form of extreme risk-taking behavior. The typical partaker of Russian roulette is a young man who is under the influence of alcohol or drugs and acts out in the presence of others. Alcohol consumption in the social context may entice an adolescent to engage in high-risk behaviors.
Sociology professor and author Jean Beckler described 4 distinct types of suicide: escapist, aggressive, oblative, and ludic. The ludic type is subdivided into the ordeal and the game. The ordeal refers to risking one's life to prove oneself to oneself or to seek the judgment of others.
I like his categorization of suicide. Very interesting. It kind of feels like the ordeal or game type. It kind of reminds me of a coming of age ritual or a gang initiation, that type of vibe.
Yeah.
You know that tribe? I honestly don't remember where the fuck they're from, but they do that coming of age ritual where they jump from a platform they build with a rope.
Oh, yeah.
And they crash into the ground, but the vine is at the right length and stretchiness to minimize the impact. But sometimes people die, and that's their big ritual. The alligator scarification stuff.
Yeah, that's just wild.
They infect it with smoke. Like there's this social ordeal you put yourself through to prove something. I think we've talked about this before. Male dolphins. Do you remember this one?
Maybe.
There's a thing where male adolescent dolphins sometimes, I don't know how often it occurs, but they will find a pufferfish and purposely like munch on it till they get stung, and they will then go off into the ocean alone and trip for a couple days, and when they return back to their dolphin pack, they're like a man. Like it's their they go have a hard trip, and that's their ritual. It's so cool. That shows such a high level of some sort of intelligence. I'm not sure what exactly, but there's a higher cognitive functioning going on, or at least ritual activity. But I really like the breakdown of, or the concept of Russian roulette being an ordeal or game type suicide, where it's a suicide behavior, but there's also this social element or attempt to prove something involved.
Yeah. I've kind of always seen it that way, and I feel like that's the way it's usually depicted in media, is like
how tough you are.
Yeah, how tough you are, or like just your resolve.
How reckless.
There's a whole thing with like Malcolm X, and they talked about it in the video, like the movie documentary, and it was like he did a round of Russian roulette, but apparently had palmed the bullet the whole time. But it was still like he's trying to rally people and like get people to understand that like he's not afraid to die for this, like he's here for it, kind of thing. So
dramatic showmanship.
Yeah,
he was a hardcore motherfucker.
He was.
I don't understand the Muslim connections. There's some weirdness there, but fuck, he was cool.
Yeah,
dude. Oh man, Russian roulette is like smoking in the sense where, you know, it's clearly bad for you, but god damn, it does look badass, right? Like it is pretty cool.
Super cool.
Yeah. So this sociologist also postulates that participants in Russian roulette desire to prove something by challenging probability. A winner of this activity is alive. Survival rests in the hands of fate. The customary attributes of a successful sportsman, specifically skill, bravery, intelligence, they all play no role. Suicide as a game involves the sole purpose of playing with one's life in recognition of the chance of fatality. The ultimate stakes of life versus death constitute the thrilling appeal of Russian roulette.
So this 10-year study, which summarizes the features of Kentucky medical examiner autopsies of self-inflicted cranial firearm injuries, concentrates special attention on Russian roulette. The process includes analysis of autopsy and toxicological reports and investigatory evidence uncovered by coroners and law enforcement officials. As Kentucky is by statute a dual coroner medical examiner system, the coroner of jurisdiction determines whether a decedent shall undergo autopsy. In this respect, the analysis covers only those cases that were referred by the coroner to the medical examiner's office for a post-mortem examination and subsequently certified as suicide. We describe characteristics unique to Russian roulette, discuss the contentiously debated issue whether the manner of death should be classified as an accident, suicide, or undetermined, and offer a rationale for attributing the deaths to suicide.
Materials and methods. They recorded the age, race, and sex as well as post-mortem toxicological findings of each fatality. For Russian roulette, they charted the location of the pronouncement of death, whether there was a suicide note or not, the presence of other individuals at the death scene, history of suicide attempts, the month of the year of death, marital status, and recent life stressors. Toxicological analyses were performed on blood, urine, and other matrices as indicated by case specifics. The screening covered alcohol and other volatiles, as well as a multitude of prescription, over-the-counter, and illicit drugs. They're looking for all the good shit.
All the good shit. A total of 2,864 cases from all 120 Kentucky counties were attributed to suicide at the medical examiner's offices between 1993 and 2002. All cases of suicide which were not referred to the medical examiner are not included in the review. A self-inflicted firearm wound was the leading cause of death, accounting for 1,933 suicides, which is about 67.5%. Of these, 1,485 individuals succumbed to a gunshot wound of the head, representing 76.8% of the firearm fatalities and 51.8% of the suicides. 24 had been playing Russian roulette.
So they took all the counties of Kentucky for 10 years. They put all the deaths that the medical examiners attributed to suicide, and they went through them over the years, and all the ones that they could distinguish that this was most likely Russian roulette opposed to a typical gun to the temple, whatever, suicide. They take those cases, they put those 24 Russian roulette deaths aside, and they studied those in more detail. The population of Kentucky in the 2000 census was 4 million and whatever, big number, 4 million people. The racial composition was 90.1% white and 7.3% African American. So this is a big factor because while the majority of Russian roulette deaths in Kentucky were all white males. That isn't necessarily inherent with Russian roulette in general, but we're going to talk about that in a bit. The huge majority of cerebral firearm fatalities were male and white. All Russian roulette victims were male, and 79.2% were white. The ages were conspicuously different between the two groups. Ages ranged from 11 and 96 years, with a mean of 42 years old in the cerebral firearm injury group. So those are the people that were shot in the head or committed suicide. Their mean age was 42 years, compared with the range of 14 to 47, with an average age of 24.8 years of the Russian roulette group. So they're comparing these two groups a lot of the typical gunshot to the head wound. So that average age was 42 years old, but the Russian roulette average age was much younger at 24.8 years old. So
range between 14. That means there's one of the people was 14.
Yeah, that's
sad shit right there.
Yeah, Russian roulette is definitely a young man's game. It's primarily male, and it's primarily younger males compared to other general forms of suicide or death, for sure.
The postmortem toxicological analysis. When analyzing the blood and urine toxicology for those who died from Russian roulette compared to those of a cerebral firearm injury group, the examiners discovered some significant differences. Blood toxicology was negative in 478 cases, that's about 34.3%, in the cerebral firearm injury group, and in 4 within the Russian roulette group, that represents about 20%. So that means that there was no substances, no blood alcohol, high blood alcohol level within 20% of the Russian roulette group.
So 80% of them, the vast majority, were altered on some substance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A significant relationship existed in the detection of drugs in urine between the Russian roulette group and the suicidal cranial firearm group. Drugs were detected in urine of the majority of Russian roulette subjects, about 69%, and in less than half of those who died with a suicidal cranial firearm wound. Cannabinoids were detected in urine of 1/3 of the Russian roulette cases, and in 17.8% of the suicidal cranial firearm wounds. However, the relationship was not statistically significant.
I think when they say not statistically significant, they're talking about the cannabis, the devil's lettuce specifically. Yeah. What's really interesting about those stats, though, is so they're comparing regular suicides to Russian roulette deaths, basically. Or I guess it could be gunshot wounds to the head in general. Yeah. But even compared to those forms of a violent gunshot to the head death, the Russian roulette chances of being intoxicated were much higher.
Yeah.
And specific to alcohol compared to other drugs and antidepressants even. Like it is a primarily, compared to the other substances, it's primarily linked to alcohol specifically, which is really interesting.
Yeah. Alcohol makes you do bad shit.
Yeah. Or
alcohol sucks.
Man, I quit alcohol far before I quit heroin. Fuck, alcohol sucks. I loved it so much, but I knew, like, I had so much less control of myself with alcohol. And I can see in these potentially, like, social interactions where you're fucking around with a gun trying to prove something. It really is like a, liquid courage, drink a bunch of alcohol, spin a gun, and see what happens type of thing. But I wouldn't have guessed it was that high.
You heard it here first, folks. Don't bother with alcohol. Go straight to chasing the dragon.
Dude, I honestly would recommend that to most people. It's just, there's such alcohol has a low bar to entry. Like you're 16 and someone gives you alcohol, wine at dinner, whatever. Easy to get into, still hard to get out of. But heroin, potentially even safer as a drug by itself than alcohol. But the bar to entry is so high because you can't jump right to it or you just die.
that's something that we can change. So what you do is you find, the neighborhood block party or something where there's kid, the parents are out of town, they're throwing a party and they got a couple cases of beer, and you go and you confiscate all that beer and you tell them, hey, use this
instead, and give them some real chopped up heroin
and one needle.
You can't let them shoot right off the bat. You got to get them hooked through the nose cannon.
I'm sorry for not knowing the.
You don't know how to sell drugs to kids? Come on.
I didn't realize that the first time you do heroin, you're not supposed to shoot it.
Not the first time. Maybe the second. In review of the context of 24 Russian roulette cases, the presence of other individuals at the time of the fatal Russian roulette was documented in 19 of the 24 cases. That is wild to me. I would not have thought it was that high. But I do think there's an element to... So, in 19 of 24 cases, they're saying there's other people there, which means 5 of the 24, there were not other people there. I would imagine those 5 cases, it was more complicated in how they would actually determine that it was most likely Russian roulette. And I think there still could be a lot of cases that were ruled a suicide that Russian roulette may or may not have been involved in, but did not make it into that case grouping. But it does make... I'm just surprised by it, but I guess it does make sense to me that 19 of the 24 other people were present. That's just really high. I just didn't think of it that way as much.
I guess, I think I mentioned it earlier. I feel like I've always seen it as like a social
party trick
thing.
Almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like something there's a flair to it that you're showing off by doing it. So by doing it by yourself, like that's some wild shit.
Tempting fate to me sounds, I don't know, it sounds scarier in a lot of ways than tempting like another individual. Like as a guy, instead of like fighting or like, being in a shootout, it seems a little scarier to me than just rolling the dice.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Fate's a motherfucker.
They'll fuck you up.
Yeah, every time. Or a good percentage of the time.
Yeah. The majority of Russian roulette subjects had been in the presence of 3 or fewer friends. 1 victim was alone. 6 were with 1 other individual. 7 had been with 2 friends. 3 were with 3 other people. 1 had been with 4 friends, and another had been in the presence of at least 10 others.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's wild. Imagine being at that party with 10 people when that happens.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck. Like, you just fucked everyone's psyche for a long time.
You fucking super buzzkill.
Ugh.
Ruin the vibe, man. You ruined the vibe.
Just a crashing halt to the party.
Someone there was taking an opportunity to like, all right, tonight's the night. I'm gonna ask out Angie tonight. We're gonna I play my card.
Bam!
Maybe we'll make it work. And things might have been a little rocky, but maybe they were getting good. And then all of a sudden, you just hear bam from the next room. Fuck, Ted. You couldn't have waited.
God damn it, Ted.
God damn it, Ted. That's dark. I'm sorry.
Yeah, most people definitely don't commit suicide at a party like that. Or even among a group of friends. So that there's clearly a social element at play. An opportunity to prove bravery or apathy, maybe, among peers. I feel like I really understand this one, and maybe I'll speak to that more later, but it is such an unflinchingly chance of taking the ultimate risk to do that, especially with friends around. It's something I like I said.
Now they all got to go to court.
Yeah, for sure. Or at the police station, at least. Like, I can't fully understand it how I once was able to, but fuck, man. I don't know, to watch a buddy go out that way would be so fucking terrible.
Yeah.
So the study goes on to define risk-taking behaviors as volitional acts that pose significant risks to life or limb. Several biopsychosocial theories have been proposed for risk-taking behavior. Risk-taking may either A, represent a healthy and constructive component of adolescent maturation as the youngster develops a unique personality and autonomy, or B, adversely influence the adolescent to engage in behaviors with injurious or fatal consequences.
Psychological theories encompass personality characteristics and cognition. Risk-taking behaviors have been closely associated with sensation seeking, the latter defined as a need for varied, novel, and complex sensations and experiences, and the willingness to take risks for the sake of such experiences.
I'm a bit of a sensation seeker, but not to...
Oh, really? You think so?
But I don't know. I'm not like... Not compared to a lot of people I've known that are hardcore about it. Like, I wanted certain sensations, but I wasn't a big seeker. I was into the sensations, but I wasn't really into seeking them.
Okay, if we're making a scale of like normal, jack-offs to like the hardcore, like bungee jump once a day and does, jackass shit on a regular basis. On that scale, you are definitely higher than half. I would say that.
I would say I'm higher than the middle, but there are some motherfuckers out there that are...
there's always going to be someone that's more bonkers about it.
But I just feel like there's a lot of young men that could rank pretty high on that.
Between you and me.
Yeah, you're at the bottom. You're just chilling.
I'm done. I'm just chilling over here.
You don't need to seek no sensations. You got everything you need. You got COVID sensations.
I got COVID. Yeah, I'm about to lose my sensation of smell and taste.
So this was kind of cool. The sensation-seeking scale is divided into 4 subsets: thrill and adventure seeking, experience seeking, disinhibition, and boredom susceptibility. It's like a susceptible hillbilly.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought too.
They rank high on the scale. I like that breakdown though. Because
I think that's good.
Yeah, I can see where I'd be high in some ways, but things in other ways not so much. I would imagine that gives a pretty good readout on a person for their tolerance for risky behavior. Both Russian roulette, this is wild. Both Russian roulette and autoerotic asphyxia epitomize extreme forms of risk-taking behavior. Fatal autoerotic asphyxia results from the participant engaged in solo sexual activity and the release mechanism of the apparatus. It's not always an apparatus.
Yeah, that's a pretty big word for the belt got stuck.
These sex apparatus designed to obtain hypoxia for enhanced arousal fails. So they're relating autoerotic asphyxia to Russian roulette.
Yeah. And I can understand that and they're going to get more into that to, they're comparing it in the way that is a risk-taking behavior that puts your life at some kind of risk.
Yeah, I'm not big on the autoerotic asphyxia.
Too
much work for little reward.
Yeah, it's
somebody else can choke me, but I don't want to use all my strength choking myself.
Right, that's weird. There's like you got to set shit up, and it's like then you got to clean it up afterward too, and it's like. There's that shame.
Breakdown, like breaking down camp. Like you're camping, you got to break down your tent. You got to like fold up the belt. You got to take the bag off your head. I got to go to work
in 10 minutes. I can't be dealing with all this shit.
10 minutes? I got more time for it than 10 minutes. I'll say that.
I just mean 10 minutes to clean up all untie the belt and to,
All right, here's a segue. Have you seen the new hyper-realistic sex dolls? There's one called
I guess not.
My Real Doll or something, and there's been big internet debates on it right now because it looks as close as an inanimate object can be to a human. That like $10,000 base cost.
Jesus fuck, boys.
They're hand sculpted, hand artisan painted, removable parts. They weigh semi-realistic weights.
I like. Hold on, I want to go back. You said hand artisan painted, and I'm thinking like artisans of the
subway.
You know, when you think artisan, I usually think of like medievalish times, and like everything was like hand done by like an old artist or someone that like passed on their skills and their abilities, and like now it's like I'm picturing this old-timey classical painter that takes up a job working at the Real Doll factory.
Dude, that's what it's like. They paint pimples and pores and freckles. Dude, I mean, it is hyper-realism. The skin has like the right tackiness or luminance where you see like light through the ear. All of those, like, it is surprising. So there's a big issue with it because this company doesn't, but some companies make underage models.
Oh.
And there's like the debate of like, can this be used as a tool to prevent violent actions towards children, or should people be able to buy sex dolls that look this realistic? There's all these questions at play, but it's incredibly interesting. The short of it is, it takes you like 30 minutes to clean it up. Because if you don't, if you don't do it right and empty out all these chambers and canals, and you have to use baby powder and like powder it down.
You just fold it up and put it in the dishwasher, man. What are you talking about?
That's what you do with the chambers, but you can't wash the whole thing. It won't fit. They deliver it to you in a crated box that's like stapled shut and it weighs 200 pounds. Looks like you got like a coffin delivered. It's wild. There's some interesting stuff out there, but I'm all for it. I like people that do weird shit. But anyway, we conducted a study of 16 victims of autoerotic asphyxia in Kentucky between 1993 and 2001. So the same time, they also looked at these erotic asphyxia deaths. The ultimate goal of both practices, Russian roulette and autoerotic asphyxiation, is the quest for a heightened excitement. In Russian roulette, by challenging probability, and autoerotic asphyxia by ligature-induced hypoxia to attain sexual gratification. I do get the relationship or comparison between the two.
Yeah, so suicidal intent is not readily apparent in either behavior. However, the extreme risk of placing a loaded gun against the head in Russian roulette signifies deliberate volitional activity, reducing the probability of survival to nearly zero. This is distinguishable from the design of a release mechanism and protective padding used in autoerotic asphyxia, upon which it is reasonable to infer the lack of suicidal intent.
I get that. There's an escape mechanism most people have at play involved in choking themselves out, opposed
you're not doing it with the chance that like, oh, I could die doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a little bit part of it, but the idea is that you're gonna, put your belt back around your waist and buckle up and go to work, but
right before work every day. The majority of Russian roulette sensation seekers and of autoerotic asphyxia fatalities were single men younger than 30 years. I keep saying men like I am like an advocate for men's rights or like mental health related to men specifically, and I definitely don't feel that way, but I am trying to emphasize that this just happens to be the group this affects the most.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of cringe men's stuff going on right now. So trying to distinguish the trash cats.
Yeah, separate yourself from it.
No red pill shit here. That's for sure. The Russian roulette studies collectively establish this typical paradigm. A younger white male under the influence of alcohol or drugs engaging in Russian roulette with at least one other person.
Contrarily, autoerotic asphyxia victims typically engage in this behavior in solitude, unaffected by alcohol or drugs. In the uniquely overlapping case of the 27-year-old victim in the present study, we postulate that he wanted to capture the ultimate thrill of risk-taking behaviors, as he died of a cephalic firearm wound while participating in a combined Russian roulette autoerotic experience.
Damn, that dude was going out hard as fuck. Literally.
Quite literally, yeah.
Dude, props to him. That's multitasking ability. That dude could have lived a very high-functioning life. Damn. I'm with it, though. Like,
yeah, that sounds extreme, but I mean, like, he was out here doing it.
Doing it big. You gotta mix your vices. Like, if you have one addiction, you definitely should mix it with the other. Nothing bad will happen. It'll just make them both better. If you like to drink, you like to gamble, get drunk and gamble. You got to mix shit up. You like to do heroin
and you like to do coke. Just do both.
Speedballing, baby. Feels amazing.
It's never hurt anyone.
Never once. You have to mix things up. Spice. What is it? But variety is the spice of life.
Yeah.
A little bit of Russian roulette, a little bit of autoerotic of sex, keep it spicy.
God damn it. The group mentality prompting Russian roulette may convince reluctant individuals to participate as a means of gaining pure acceptance and approval. Players' judgments are often clouded by the effects of alcohol and drugs, inciting those so influenced to engage in a risky and potentially fatal behavior. The pathopsychologic effects of alcohol exacerbate psychologic distress, increase aggressiveness, and constrict cognition by interfering with the development of coping strategies.
That is so true.
Yeah.
Holy fuck. Another study titled Targeting Adolescent Risk-Taking Behaviors surveyed 381 junior high and high school students and 343 college students, reported a significant association between alcohol and drug use and sensation.
Sensation. You went full on
box of chocolates.
You went full West Virginia on that shit.
Every once in a while, my southern roots poke their head. God damn it.
The man from Cincinnati with the least southern accent.
The highest alcohol and drug consumption was reported for participants high in sensation seeking, whereas the lowest alcohol and drug consumption was noted by individuals low in sensation seeking.
In a national household survey of 2,058 adults 18 years and older, individuals who had sustained an injury, which is about 12% of the total, in the previous year were more likely to be younger men who reported moderate and heavy drinking and more frequent drunkenness, compared with those without injuries. Furthermore, the injured group was more likely to be associated with risk-taking or impulsivity in sensation-seeking.
Pretty wild to think, 12% of people are just busted up because of their alcohol problems.
Yeah. God damn.
In studies of men and
Put down the bottle, Susan.
In studies of men and their relationship between alcohol and risk-taking behavior, the results are clear. In one particular study, 54 men were divided into 3-person groups that consumed either alcohol or a placebo, and subsequently were instructed to either toss a coin, which would be the risky option, or complete a questionnaire, the less risky alternative.
The alcohol groups were more likely to select the coin toss, suggesting that decisions formulated by intoxicated groups of individuals can be riskier than those of sober groups.
That's kind of a boring test, but I guess it does demonstrate, the more people drink, the more likely they're going to choose the risky option.
I mean, yeah, get a couple beers in me and ask me if I want to do a questionnaire. Go fuck yourself.
It depends on how wasted I am. If I'm super wasted, I'll do any questionnaire you want. I'll give you whatever answers you want. I'm ready to do some research of my own at that point. In the United States, tattooing and body piercing, other than the earlobe, all right, this is some wacky shit, represent a form of rebellion against established society. Adolescents may desire a tattoo or body piercing to flaunt a group association or to express individuality. In a case control study of 20 white psychiatric patients in Tennessee and Virginia, a strong correlation was demonstrated between participation in Russian roulette and the types and numbers of tattoos and body piercings.
10% of the body-modified individuals had played Russian roulette. 20% had seen another person play and die. 35% had seen it played with fatality or injury.
Damn.
And 20% had friends who had succumbed to Russian roulette. This is compared with only 5% of the control group who had played Russian roulette without death or injury and 5% who had friends dying from Russian roulette. Furthermore, there is an increase in all types of violent behavior coexistent with the increasing extent of tattooing and body piercing as determined by number, location, and theme of tattoo.
Oh boy. So I have to comment on this.
Yeah, of course you do.
So I acknowledge there's something to what they're saying, but I feel like they're jumping the gun a little bit. So this mostly, to me, sounds like a Tennessee problem. All right, this is what happens when you have your case control group be 20 whatever white males from a Tennessee psychiatric facility. Because
yeah, there's a lot of that in a couple of these studies where they're in places where the averages are too far off to actually get real numbers.
We're starting in Kentucky, and now we're in Tennessee psych units. So this sounds like these dudes are playing a lot of Russian roulette, like a higher percentage than most people.
Let me ask you, have you ever been to Tennessee?
Yeah, I have once.
There's not much else to do.
What else? Go to the lake, play some Russian roulette, and drink some buds.
Yeah, drink some Bud Lights.
I also feel like the correlation between body modification and risk-taking behavior is a bit of an outdated theory. I agree with the part that considers the nature or theme of the modifications as being a factor, because I think that part is so subjective and individually tailored to the person that it does say a lot. Is your tattoo Satan fucking killing some virgins, or is it of like your family name, right? Like that's
or you got a butterfly on your ass crack, you know?
Right? It changes a lot. I may be pretty wrong on this, but I don't know if you can truly show a direct correlation between body modification and risk-taking behavior. My intuition says that's not truly provable. I definitely acknowledge there's an element for sure of rebellion tied to altering your appearance. But I feel like this is also dictated by culture, and that the nature of tattoos and piercings have radically changed so much, even in 20 years or whatever, since 2008 or 12 years, whatever, that in so many places, I don't know if you could directly connect them to risk-taking behavior anymore.
Now, and to your own point, that, this study that was done from 93 to 2002, during that time, it was still seen a little bit more as a taboo. Not even like I wouldn't even say it was a taboo at that point, but like it
was more rebellious than it is today.
Right. Today it's like people just have tattoos and that's just whatever. It's not a thing.
There's a lot of normies that look pretty strange these days. And I'm here for it, but I also don't know. You're looking at psych unit Tennessee patients, right? Like young males, like I feel like you're going to get a higher percentage of tattoos than normal. You definitely got a higher percentage of them that had been around personally or through friends been around Russian roulette. So I don't know. I just feel like you can't, I would reject even a modern current study that can definitively tie body modification and things that are violent to any substantial amount. I can definitely acknowledge there's a connection, but I don't think you could prove a massive connection without evaluating the subjectivity of what the modifications are or represent.
Now, let me give you this. Let me paint a picture for you. Let's say you're at the ER, you're in the waiting room for whatever reason, and you see the doors bust open and they come in with somebody on a gurney, and they're like trying to rush them to a room, and there's a couple of doctors and the EMTs are rushing the cart in, and you see a couple of it looks like the victim's friends are there, and they're like explaining what's going on and what happened and how they got into this mess, and you overhear that it's a Russian roulette. incident, and you look up and you look at the individuals, the friends that are there with them. How many face piercings does one of them have? And how many of them have tattoos? And the answer is at least one of them has a couple face piercings, and they all have some kind of tattoo.
Yeah, I mean, most likely. But, I mean, that my answer counters my theory. But
I feel like I know what you're saying. I'm just...
It's like the don't judge a book by its cover thing. Like when you hear people say, like, oh, you shouldn't judge people for how they look by the color of their skin, by how many facial piercings and tattoos they have. No, you should judge those things, but it doesn't mean you inherently judge them as bad or wrong, or you know what I mean? Like if I see somebody with a bunch of teardrop tattoos, I should be judging them, but I don't have to like morally judge them. But you have to make an evaluation.
I want to step in real quick because you said you included by the color of their skin on there, and I don't think that's what you meant, though.
No, I did mean it, but in the way, like, all people are different. Just because I see someone with a different color of skin doesn't mean I should, like, assume negative things about them, but it does tell me something about them. Like, it is a judgment, it's just not a negative.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, yeah.
Because you hear people do the whole colorblind thing, like, oh, I shouldn't even see their race, or like, if I'm in Price Hill,
that's stupid.
And I see a dude who's Mexican, I have some information about them. I know they are a Mexican dude from Price Hill. Like, that's a judgment, but I don't think there's anything bad or wrong about that.
You can infer based on that information what part of his life must be like being the only Mexican dude in Price Hill.
And there's a ton.
Oh, is there?
There is. There's a lot. But it doesn't...
Shows me what I know about my own hometown.
It's changed a lot. But I don't think... I would think it's wrong if you make big jumps. If you're like, hey, I know this and this, I can make a lot of judgments about them. I think that'd be going too far, but it does tell me a little bit. And I think there's kind of an error in assuming you shouldn't use any contextual information about people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It is a tricky thing because I definitely realize even just saying it in that small way can sound like you're criticizing people, but I don't know. I think it's, if nothing else, it's honest to how most people function, even if it's not what they say.
Yeah. I think it's definitely fair to say that it's not concluding that people who are anyone with a tattoo is higher risk to be a sensation seeker. I don't think that's entirely true.
See, but I would say, based on the tattoo itself, I might be able to say that. If you have a massive, all blacked out piece that goes across half your face, I think it is kind of fair to assume
that's different. That's definitely different.
Some tolerance to pain. They have some nature that leans into the extreme. If they got a swastika, it's pretty fair to assume a bunch of things. Like, you should judge that book by its cover to some extent, at least.
Right. That's the cover that they have chosen to present to the world rather than what was initially given to them.
And the flip side of that would be, let's assume this dude does have a bunch of swastika tattoos. You could assume, like, massive piece of shit, absolute garbage. The reality is there's a ton of actually good dudes that have really hateful tattoos that they got in their youth or when they were a piece of shit, or they got them in prison because they felt they had to, and they changed. Like, I still think it's fair to judge them, but I think the part of not going too far would be to judge that part of them, but not to morally judge them as a whole. And part of that depends on the tattoo itself too. But
yeah, this is completely coming from a place of ignorance, but I feel like the you know, like they got a tattoo in prison to like
it's a
fit
thing.
in with, yeah, like I feel like I understand that coming from, you know, just not, you know, definitely not saying I know what it's like or anything like that at all, but you know, from the way it's been presented to me my whole life, the idea of like, okay, yeah, I can get some kind of protection. I can, you know, I can take care of myself a little bit better in here by,
or you don't have to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And some of it is like, maybe if you are a really strong, confident person who can take care of yourself really well, maybe you don't need to fall into that as much. But if you're a vulnerable person and you're in a strange place of people that want to hurt you, it's a lot easier to fall into whatever social pressure out of self-preservation. It is a tricky thing. I'm not making a ruling on if that's okay to do or not, but it is a thing. And a lot of people regret those decisions later too.
Speaking of making a ruling, let's get back to Russian roulette.
Nice. Judge Ricky is in the building. Court is now in session.
7 of the Russian roulette fatalities in the present study bore a tattoo. It's about 30% of the 24 mentioned. Although a tattoo may exhibit an act of defiance against social norms, it may relay the contrary message, specifically an embracing of a social organization. Similarly, participation in Russian roulette may symbolize a rite of passage into a desired social group.
Yeah, definitely. What comes to mind for me is military tattoos or police tattoos. It can also be your token of membership, or, you know, you could try to play Russian roulette to fit in with your friends or be part of a gang group, whatever. The determination in Russian roulette fatalities has been subject of prolonged and contentious debate among medical legal death investigators without resolution. In an effort to provide consistent and uniform criteria for the demonstration of suicide, a working group of coroners, medical examiners, statisticians, and public health officials in 1988 based the definition of suicide on 2 primary components. 1, the death was self-inflicted, determined by pathological, toxicological, historical, or sociologic evidence. And 2, the decedent intended to end his or her life or wished to die and comprehended the potential fatal consequences of his or her actions.
Explicit intent refers to verbal or nonverbal indications of self-injury and may be evident by a suicide note. Implicit or indirect intent is exemplified by hopelessness, emotional or physical distress, previous suicide attempt, severe depression or mental illness, and recognition of high potential lethality of method of death.
Side note, if you're going to kill yourself, write a fucking note.
Yeah, seriously, y'all.
Just write the note.
It saves a lot of people a lot of trouble.
Yeah, definitely. Acknowledging the determination of suicidal intent is a multi-dimensional task. Beck and colleagues developed the suicidal intent scale. This scale encompasses suicidal actions and ideation and is divided into 4 distinct subsets: attitudes towards suicidal attempt, planning and preparations, precautions against intervention, and oral communication with others.
A Russian roulette fatality represents an equivocal type of death, marked by varying interpretations concerning the appropriate manner of death. In a typical Russian roulette game, the participant is faced with a 1 in 6 probability of death. It's a 16% chance.
Honestly, it's a lot lower than you may, at least I initially thought. Like, it feels like you're almost for sure going to die if you were to play this game, but 16%, you're going to live most of the time. I don't know. I find that kind of interesting because it does feel like a suicidal action, but 84%, whatever of the time, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, I think it's fair to assume that despite those odds, you are still assuming
death.
Yeah, exactly.
This has led some to aptly argue as follows. Russian roulette is also considered a suicidal act. The rationale is that first, the decedent was in control of the environment. Second, he or she took deliberate steps to prepare for the event. The deceased obtained the gun, unloaded it, placed one bullet in the chamber, closed the chamber, cocked the hammer, placed the gun to the head, and pulled the trigger. This is a total of 7 deliberate steps. The chances of survival for the next moment were intentionally reduced from infinity to 5 out of 6. So before playing Russian Roulette, you never know when's your last day, but the chances of you surviving the next moment is near infinity. But when you put one bullet in a chamber and spin it, put it to your head, go through those 7 steps, that near infinite chance of living in the next moment reduces all the way down to 5 out of 6.
Yeah.
It's pretty extreme when you put it that way.
Exactly. So we were just talking about how it seemed like, oh, that's not really all that high of a probability of death. But when you put it in that context.
That framing, it changes real quick.
In contrast, another article by Joves and colleagues on medical legal certifications of suicide in 1987, in which they rely on retrospective psychological analysis, opines that decedents in such cases intended to survive, quote, the game. In accordance with this view, the author reports that these deaths are usually certified as accidental. The probability of death is significantly increased if the individual spins and discharges the weapon on several trials before the fatal bullet, or if the player plays more than one live round into the weapon.
That's interesting, because they're kind of saying it's not about what you do, but it's how you do it. Like, I feel it definitely demonstrates a very different intent if you pull the trigger a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And they're really emphasizing the importance of survival to most players. By law, the medical legal investigators bear the responsibility of determining and certifying the cause and manner of death only after extensively evaluating the historical and scene evidence and analyzing the pathological and toxicological findings.
The determination of the manner of death incorporates the dichotomous factors of the uniqueness of each death and the similar characteristics shared by individual deaths. Death certificates initially reported the manner of death in 1910, excluding natural deaths. In 1918, the manner of death was classified into one of 5 categories: natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or undetermined. Uniform criteria for the determination of manner of death have been non-existent for many years. Such deficiencies have prompted a survey of 700 physician medical examiners / coroners of the National Association of Medical Examiners, aka NAME name, to analyze variations in assigning manners of death to various cases.
Yeah, I'm not sure, too, if since this paper in releasing 2008, if the manner of death laws or regulations have changed too. It seemed like different, like Kentucky was a dual medical examiner state, while at the same time being a no-fault state for car accidents. They need 2 medical examiners to determine death. So I don't know how these things vary, but the point of them putting that in this paper was showing how manner of death has changed and how it has been highly debated. They showed both sides of the argument, and how medical examiners and physicians and such have kind of argued over what level of evidence is needed to definitively rule a person's death, one way or another. A Russian roulette scenario was included in the survey. A 17-year-old with a blood alcohol level of 0.13 spun the chamber, placed the gun against his head, and pulled the trigger, encountering a fatal bullet on the first try. A total of 61.5% of the respondents classified this death as suicide. However, the National Center of Health Statistics, the NCHS, assigned the death as an accident caused by firearms, missile, handgun.
I don't know. That's a rough one.
It's hard to say for certain, because we can't know their mind in those final moments, no matter what we do for sure.
Subsequent discussion revealed that most medical examiners worked in an office that lacked a definitive, unified policy for Russian roulette deaths, and disclosed that manner of death determination was certifier dependent and based on regional differences.
The National Association of Medical Examiners developed a Guide for Manner of Death classification in 2002 to serve as a consistent, if not uniform, approach to death certifiers. This guide acknowledges the importance of elucidating a decedent's intent when determining manner of death.
It does acknowledge, however, that a single definition and application of intent may vary depending on manner of death classification, legal code, and public health issues.
This guide classifies Russian roulette deaths as suicidal because the action of placing a loaded gun against the head and pulling the trigger is perilous and is associated with high risk of serious injury or death. It may be impossible to determine the victim's state of mind and definitive intentions before the fatal act.
To further comprehend the mindset of both the Russian roulette participant and the cranial firearm suicide, the guide compares the terms volition and intent. Volition refers to a conscious or deliberate decision or choice, and in both scenarios involves the loading of the gun, placing it to the head, and pulling the trigger. The guide refers to intent as the purpose at the time of doing an act. Both Russian roulette and suicidal cranial firearm wound victims performed the identical volitional act. In the scenario in which Russian roulette is not a component, and based on all investigative findings, it is reasonable to infer that decedents intend death as the culmination of their efforts. The capacity to participate in an act enormously increasing the risk of death, which is unequivocally associated with Russian roulette, constitutes the intent of the volitional action.
Enmeshed in the discussion of the intent is the motive behind a suicide, specifically the causes or reasons which prompt an individual to act or to not act. Difficult life situations, such as financial difficulties, domestic turmoil, or a mental illness may serve as motive for suicide. Although all suicides have an underlying motive, it may be elusive and only inferred from gathered evidence.
Some would conclude that a suicidal manner of death should focus on the determination of intent and not be based on the motive precipitating the suicide. The primary motive associated with the risk-taking behavior of Russian roulette is the tempting of fate.
Yeah, I definitely disagree with that argument. I feel like suicide's all about motive, not what happens, right? That's how I think of suicide. It doesn't matter if you walked off a building, if you were in a catatonic state and got lured off the building like a cat. It would matter if you did it on purpose.
Right.
Yeah, I disagree with them there. Russian roulette represents the ultimate gamble with death. The goal of the typical Russian roulette game is to remain alive after the trigger is pulled. In this respect, typical Russian roulette players apparently lack the characteristic feature of a suicidal individual, specifically hopelessness, depression, and domestic, legal, or financial difficulties. The group mentality and effects of alcohol and other drugs may influence an individual to participate in Russian roulette. So they're kind of giving both sides of the argument on why it could be argued the state of mind of a player one.
Player one. The Russian roulette participant exhibits a, quote, invincible intent, accepting the potentially fatal consequences of his or her actions through lacking any anticipation of life's finality. The tantalization by the brink of death urges the player to raise a lethal weapon to one's head. The thrill of tempting fate is the driving force behind this risky behavior. Advocates of classifying Russian roulette deaths as accidental postulate that the probability of surviving a single typical Russian roulette act is 83%, and that players view the activity as simply an exhilarating pastime, similar to bungee jumping or rock climbing.
Hey, those are pretty good odds.
Yeah.
In cases of exhibitionist Russian roulette, which they regarded as accidental because participants were performing what they considered a trick to impress other people rather than gambling with death. I kind of get that. There's definitely a lot of drunk people at a bar that are wasted enough with their friends that you could potentially trick or get to perform this act as a party thing.
Yeah. Proponents of the accidental manner may be swayed to accept the suicidal manner in non-classic Russian roulette, based on increased confirmation of a participant's intent if the player spins and discharges the weapon several times or if more than one live round is present. However, the crux of the argument in support of suicide is that a revolver loaded with only one bullet is a deadly weapon capable of inflicting severe injury or death, particularly when aimed at the head.
That's basically true.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Whether a participant places a firearm once or 10 times to his head and subsequently pulls the trigger, whether 1 or 5 live rounds are in the chamber of the weapon, or whether a player confidently strives to impress his audience, deaths following such profoundly risky behavior as Russian roulette filled the suicidal criteria of both the self-inflicted act and comprehension of the possible fatal outcome.
A psychologic autopsy may serve as a valuable component to the investigation of death by one's own action. Such an exercise may shed light on the decedent's lifestyle and personality and may impact the designation of manner of death.
Definitely. I think that is so huge. While it's impossible to truly understand the last moments of another person's mind, attempting to do so as sincerely as possible can help us gain very valuable insight, which hopefully allows these medical examiners to classify the death properly. The classification of manner of death seems trivial, but when it's someone in your life, those medical determinations can have massive legal and social implications on the deceased's, not legacy, but I guess what happens
on
after.
Their name.
Yeah, on their name and what happens to their loved ones in consequence of that. And making those classifications as accurately as possible, as sincerely as possible, carries a great weight. I think anytime you're in a position where you're speaking for the dead, you have to choose your words wisely.
In conclusion. Individuals engage in risk-taking behaviors as either a personal conquest or as a symbol of group acceptance. Varying levels of danger exist in the myriad of risk-taking behaviors. The odds of a fatality are roughly equal in climbing Mount Everest and playing Russian roulette. However, a successful outcome relies partly on the participant's skill, judgment, and mastery of the equipment in the former. Russian roulette represents the ultimate gamble with death. Success is completely dependent on chance.
Cranial firearm injury is the leading cause of death in the medical examiner's case of suicide in Kentucky. In the subset study group pinpointed in this review, the typical Russian roulette participant was a white male younger than 30 years. Compared with all other cephalic firearm studies, Russian roulette participants were significantly more likely to have blood alcohol concentrations and various combinations of drugs detected in urine. The prevalence of self-inflicted gunshot wounds, especially in the Russian roulette setting, encourages further discussion about public health strategies to address appropriate and lawful control of firearm access by individuals prone to risk-taking behaviors. And since this study, we have definitely seen that conversation continue to drag on through politics in regards to things such as red flag laws, stricter background checks, the debate of gun show loopholes, assault rifle bans, bump stock bans, all those things. The idea of these studies attempting to gain a better understanding of the results of firearms and their access seems to always be a major part. And clearly there have not been answers in the United States about that. Not that I'm necessarily for any of those things, but it is a major factor in a country where guns are extremely accessible. You're going to have a lot more Russian roulette deaths than a country that doesn't have guns. It's just a big factor.
Medical examiners assume the responsibility of determining the competent cause and manner of death following a thorough post-mortem and toxicological examination and historical investigation. Documentation of Russian roulette poses the unique challenge of delving into the mindset of the participant. Some researchers have noted that risk-taking behaviors may offer an antidepressant effect in depressed young men and even suggest that Russian roulette participants may attempt to quell their depression by participating in this risky activity.
I feel like that is something that is rarely talked about in these conversations, is that things that are super risky, whether it's Russian roulette, intravenous drug use, risky behavior, sex, all those things, as potentially dangerous as those outcomes can be, I think it is foolish to outright rule those things as wrong or bad, too dangerous for people to dare risk doing.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is all of those things can also be life-saving. Not inherently by themselves, but giving people a way to express those emotions.
Yeah. Like, if life sucks and everything sucks and you're looking for a way out, you can do that, or you can do some things that make you feel like you're living a little bit, like have unprotected sex. And I mean, I'm not big on the holding a loaded handgun to your head, but I mean, fuck, man, just risky behavior in general. I guess that
it's an outlet. It can be an antidepressant. I strongly, and I don't recommend people do the same thing, but I strongly feel drugs saved my life. They later fucking ruined it, but I still needed a potentially reckless, hazardous activity to get me through a certain period of time. And while there were consequences, it did succeed in doing that. I think we all need our outlets. And even if, as silly as it sounds, I can see scenarios where a young man who's very wasted at a party, their life is a mess, and maybe they are a bit suicidal, they go to play Russian roulette with their friends, unknowingly to the rest of the group, they pull the trigger and they live. As silly as it may sound, I can imagine a world where that gives that particular person a different level of social credit, whether it's deserved or undeserved. It changes how people saw you. And then maybe it very minorly or potentially majorly changes how that person sees themselves. And in a lot of ways, that could be negative. They think of themselves as larger life, invincible, they can be more reckless in the future. But there also could be like, hey, I am a little tough. I can be ballsy. I got a little more confidence. My swagger level is raised a little bit.
Kind of a new lease on life kind of situation.
Truly, the new lease on life, I really think that is a possibility. When you take a life-ending risk, it changes your future perception of your value of life. And that is so subjective. And it, just like a tattoo can mean different things. It could mean a very bad thing, where you become a worse person, a more reckless person, a more likely to die person. Or it could help sculpt you into the type of person who values life more. I like what the paper says by at least noting that it can be an antidepressant act in a lot of ways, or I don't know, a changing effect. It's not always inherently inherently bad.
Right.
A psychological profile of the decedent, particularly in equivocal cases developed by a psychologist or psychiatrist, may provide a valuable insight into the mental status of that decedent. Russian roulette participants pose invincible intent, a knowledge and associated thrill of the potential fatality of their actions, yet lack any acceptance of life's finality. Although Russian roulette is defined as a stunt and as reckless bravado, this ultimate risk-taking behavior is not the typical after-drinking party game. But it sometimes can be.
It sure can be.
Can be.
Given the ongoing lack of uniformity in the classification of suicide by medical legal investigators, it is understandable why researchers who seek evidence-based causative factors for suicidal behaviors to develop strategies for prevention genuinely question the accuracy and validity of vital statistics data. In support of achieving uniformity, we recommend that classic Russian roulette, and therefore even more risky forms of the act, for example, using more than one bullet or repeated trigger pulls, should be classified as suicide. Even if one believes that the intent is to survive the inherently high-risk activity, the act of placing a loaded firearm against the head constitutes a dangerous suicidal behavior.
And that concludes the look at this Kentucky study. So, in conclusion, they acknowledge both sides of the debate on if it should be a suicide or not, but ultimately it seems like they side on the side that playing Russian roulette at all is a dangerous suicidal behavior.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
I think it's fair too. That's
yeah. So definitely we want to thank our researchers again. Thank you to them. And since we talked a lot about numbers and statistics involved in Russian roulette and other suicidal actions, we thought we need to take a brief look at some of the most current data opposed to a little bit of an older study. And we're going to look at that real quick, and I think we're going to bounce on out after that.
So this data is according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention from their leading causes of death reports in 2020.
That evil CDC.
Suicide was the 12th leading cause of death overall in the United States, claiming the lives of over 45,900 people.
Honestly, that's not 46,000 people in a year for all of the United States isn't that high, but it is pretty high. It's high enough to be the 12th leading cause, which is up there.
Yeah. Suicide was the second leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 10 and 14 and 25 to 34. The third leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 15 and 24. And the fourth leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 35 and 44.
Damn, dude. That's actually like...
That hits a little bit.
The second lead cause of death for individuals between 10 and 14?
Yeah.
How is it the second leading cause of death between individuals 10 and 14? Fuck, dude. How many, 10-year-olds kill themselves? To be the second leading cause?
Yeah.
Holy fuck. That's wild. I feel like most people are connected to someone who killed themselves, but it's not, it's still rare. I wouldn't have thought it, that just seems fucked.
Yeah.
Honestly, if these weren't
rough shit
from the CDC, I would not offhandedly believe that.
Yeah.
That is wild.
There were nearly 2 times as many suicides in the United States as there were homicides.
I would never have guessed that.
Yeah, that's pretty wild to me.
That makes sense. More people are going to kill themselves than they're going to kill other people, but I still never would have guessed twice as many. You think, I don't know, there's a lot of
twice
violence.
as many is a lot.
It's a lot. Wow. Over time, suicide rates have trended upwards. Over when you're zoomed out on a time scale, they have gone up, but there are periods of time where they decrease a little bit. I think part of it, we have more and more people, and then for other factors, social factors and stuff, it has increased, but I don't think that's a given. I don't think it has to be that way. But in 2020, the suicide rate among males was 4 times higher, 22 per 100,000. 4 times higher than among females. That, I would not have guessed it was that much higher than with males than
4 times higher is a lot.
It's a lot, dude. There was I'm not a fan of him, but this UFC fighter, Paddy Pimblett. He's pretty funny, but I'm not a big fan. But he recently won a fight and did this speech. They give him the mic at the end of the match. A lot of times it's Joe Rogan gives him a mic, and he gave this little speech about men's mental health, and it's a tricky thing. I kind of touched on it earlier because different groups should be allowed to focus on their issue, but I feel like when men talk about men's mental health, it feels like they're excluding other groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something to, if women have a particular issue, they should be allowed to vocally speak about it. And there is suicide affects all people. I don't think it has to be like a men's thing, but I also don't think it's bad if men who are sincere speak about it as a men's issue. I think it's kind of cringe, but in general, it should be destigmatized more, and really anyone sincerely trying to address the issue is probably doing a good thing.
Yeah, agreed.
Among females, the suicide rate was highest for those aged 45 to 64. Then that is approximately 7.9 per 100,000. Among males, the suicide rate was highest for those aged 75 and older, which was a shock to me. Like I know there's kind of the paradigm of the old lonely man who kills himself, right? At the end of their life, after they lived, they persisted in strength, right? They get lonely and sad, and then they kill themselves.
Yeah.
But I still would have thought there were more younger, depressed, mentally ill dudes who killed themselves early. Because that's what I, saw in my life, or played the part of in my life a bit. I would have guessed a lot more teenage young males were killing themselves than 75-year-olds, but...
So you got all these young people now that are like, oh man, killing yourself is so cringe. It's boomer shit.
Suicide. Yeah, it's pretty wild. It would be mostly... So the biggest group of people killing themselves is men above 75.
Yeah.
Regarding race, the rates of suicide were highest for American Indian non-Hispanic males, followed by white non-Hispanic males. Among females, the rates of suicide were highest for American Indian non-Hispanic males, followed by white non-Hispanic males. So the biggest group suicide typically affects tends to be American Indians and then whites.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting to learn that American Indian was the highest.
I don't want to speak out of term. I very well may be wrong. But my understanding of that statistic has been because alcohol often plays such a huge role in suicide deaths, and American Indians are more likely to have alcohol problems because of genetic differences. That is my understanding. I may be wrong, but I believe there are enzyme differences on how they can respond to alcohol, just like how men and women metabolize alcohol differently. There are those genetic differences at play. I believe that in combination with socioeconomic things, because Indians were fucked over in the past, there's high rates of poverty. I believe those two things at play are the reason why suicides are higher than other groups, followed by non-Hispanic white people. Kind of makes sense. It does seem like suicide tends to affect white people more than other groups, aside Indians. But it's so hard to really know those things until you look at the stats, because it's not like we're all affected by tons of suicide. So it's going to be
right.
And it's going to be the people in your bubble that you see.
Yeah, and I also feel like there's a lot of, like, generalizing it by race in general seems weird to me. I mean, I guess there's the numbers are there. It makes sense to look at it. But I don't know. The idea of suicide in general seems like such a personal thing that it's weird to generalize it in a way like that. Even like the age group thing I get, because I feel like we all go through similar things in those kind of age groups. It's like a part of the human experience. I don't know. I guess I think it's kind of hard to, what's the word, like generalize.
It is. I think the flip side though of why this data can be very important. I don't even want to pick a race. Let's make it an imaginary group. We have a group of
Martians.
Yeah, but they look like big yellow fluffy cats with red polka dots, right? Let's say this group of people from outer space that make up 1% of the population, but they make up the biggest group per capita of suicides. We would want to know why that is so we could help that group not kill themselves.
Right.
So while I agree, like on an individual level, generalizing like, oh, Indians and then white males have higher rates, black people tend to have lower rates by comparison, is such like general information. It doesn't really help anything, but knowing what traits, I mean, knowing that American Indians do have a higher rate than average could allow, whether it's money, advocacy, or addressing the conditions that lead to those outcomes to try to better them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Because if we don't have the information at all, then it's hard to...
Yeah, like if we have the information, we have the data and the numbers there, it's worth it to track it and utilize it somehow.
It does feel odd reading sometimes, though. Like, they're... Regardless of who the information is on, some statistics of groups of people's death is... It's hard to put words to uncomfortable realities of the world sometimes.
Yeah.
I thought it was really important we address these statistics because, like in these Kentucky studies, of course we're going to have a massive discrepancy of white people killing themselves.
Right.
But when we look at the even zoomed out more data on suicides, it does make sense that it would be a large percent white, but it also is because we are in a place that was primarily white. So you have to look at all of the factors at play. And I found a lot of these stats pretty mind-boggling. It's sad when you think of like how many people kill themselves every year. A very low percentage of them are Russian roulette. It's a pretty exceptional scenario. But it is really sad to see how many people kill themselves. But on the other side of that fucking bullet is the fact, like, compared to how many people feel miserable every fucking day of their life. They hate their job, they hate their life, they hate their family or their home. They don't have shit in the world. And they don't want to be here, or they got real fucking problems. I think when you reframe it like that, it's pretty remarkable how many people choose to be here every day.
Yeah.
Because you only have to choose to check out once. And it's easy to say, like, oh, trending suicides, the world's fucked, that's so sad. It's like, yo, there's a lot of people that don't live well, and there's a lot of people that persevere through that.
Let me advocate for something that we've both talked about on the show before. It was a while ago for sure, but I'd like to propose to anyone that's struggling or having issues in life. Have you tried living out of spite yet? That shit works.
Because stands on
that shit super fucking works. Nothing makes you feel more powerful, especially, you know, if you believe in a God, it makes it even better because then you can be like, oh, God gave you these challenges for you to overcome and to get stronger through them. And that's a thing. Or you can look at it like, well, God gave me these challenges. Well, fuck him. He's making my life hard for no goddamn reason. I'm gonna, you know, you think this is gonna take me out? Fuck you. I'll show you, motherfucker. And, you know, you live out of spite of what God tries to impose on you.
Yeah, you go through challenges just to spite God.
Yeah.
Just to... it will never be a permanent solution. You can't live for anyone, and you can't live against anyone sustainably. But finding those, whatever excuse it is, and spite's a powerful motivator to live in antithesis to the world that's trying to kill you at all times is a powerful thing. And it might not be sustainable forever.
It can definitely help get you through some rough patches, though.
Exactly. Yeah.
If anything, it is a very powerful feeling in a heated moment where you're at your wit's end and you're just like, you know what? Fuck the gods and powers that be. You're not going to fucking stop me from doing what I need to do. And you do it, and then you feel like you have this sense of personal accomplishment that you defied the gods. They tried to make you stop, and you said, no, fuck you.
Yeah, whatever outlet that is, even if it's an unhealthy one, just like Russian Roulette is a bad outlet, right? Yeah. But not always. Even if you're making the wrong decisions, like before you choose suicide, the choice that gives you no more choices, right?
Yeah.
I think it's only fair you exhaust as many other outlets, good or bad, as possible before you make final decisions. Even if the other decisions are still bad, choosing to do heroin, not smart, guys, but beats killing yourself, gives you a chance, right? Whatever that decision is. Not that I think that's the smartest path, but you have to try all your other outlets first. It's harm reduction.
Yeah.
In an extreme way.
So that being said, we're going to challenge each other to a quick game of Russian roulette for pizza.
I'm craving pizza. I would love a big gooey cheese pizza right now. I have severe stomach pains that have been going on for a while. I would still eat a big gooey cheese pizza right now.
Pizza's one of the worst things for me. I can't have the
grease.
I think it's the tomato, the sauce in it.
Acid.
Usually, the acid. I get the fucking acid reflux like crazy.
Fucks my mom up too. I don't understand how people can have such weak stomachs that they can't have pizza sauce. It's tomatoes. It's like the healthiest shit I get all week.
You know what's wild? Because I can have all kinds of like spicy food and shit like that, or like even like fried stuff doesn't really fuck me up that bad. Pizza always gets me.
I really have heard there's something specific about the acid of tomato that sets people with stomach shit off.
I know if you store metal, or if you store tomato sauce in the refrigerator, don't do it in a metal container because it will eat through the sealing on a metal container. I thought that's interesting.
Yeah, and like salsa is one of those apocalypse foods. You can store that shit for years.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
It's all going to be chips and salsa in the apocalypse.
Dude, I'd be pretty cool.
I'd be down as fuck for just Mexican food apocalypse. I'm down.
I could eat me hella tortilla chips.
Just frijoles all day long.
Well, what are you gonna do tonight with your COVID energy? You gonna
I don't feel like crashing again just yet. I know I gotta take my temperature again.
A second wind.
I gotta check, make sure my fever's gone, or at least staying.
This has all been a fever hallucination. You're gonna wake up tomorrow, no episode recorded.
Oh my god!
Just a voice. There's just a 2-hour voicemail of you babbling to yourself.
There was, honestly, this morning, I didn't remember texting you earlier today. I looked up.
Really?
I went to like text you around, like mid-afternoon, and I saw that we had already talked, and I had to look at it for a minute, like, when was that? And because I'd kind of been in and out of sleep most of the morning. So I was like, was that last night or that? And I realized it was just a couple hours ago, and I was like, oh shit.
Dude, that seems wild. You have this like second burst energy. I know you got some meds in you now and stuff, but you kind of, Frankenstein back up for a podcast.
I've been kind of faking it till you make it over here.
Hey, you faked it well.
Shit. I definitely, I don't think I'm ready to go straight back to sleep, but I'm sure I'm going to get on this couch and get some more drugs in me, and I'll be able to pass out. I got to take my second round of antiviral shit, so.
Nice. Dude, that color theory lecture I sent you, really good for both as a serious look at color theory stuff, but also just like good chill vibes. Because for us, having some loser art professor nerd talk about art theories and work, very calming. Might be a nice way to fall asleep. So I'm saying.
Heard that. Thank you. I will look into that.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we got some really cool topics that I don't want to leak them out. Because I know we got hackers hot on our tail trying to get this hot scoop, but we got some cool ideas coming up, and I don't know. I feel pretty good how the podcast has been lately, and we got some fun stuff ahead for sure.
Damn right. Well, thanks again for listening, everybody. Thank you to Approaching Human for the use of his music. You can find his work on SoundCloud at Approaching-Human.
Thanks, John. Love you.
Make sure to check out the show page at Trashcats Trashcast on Instagram for news and arts from the show. Also, check out Facebook for the memes.
Facebook for the memes. If you're super bored, you can check out my trash yard on Instagram at Skyzix, SKYZACX. I'm getting some new stuff up there. It's been okay. Honestly, I love what I've been making lately. It's taken me a while. So in the meantime, definitely make sure to check out our honorable mentions artists. Both of them are on Instagram. Ben Tolman at BENTOLMAN and Frank Benasakon at FRANCKB.art. Really, those artists are really cool. Check them out, and then you can check my stuff out as an afterthought. And shouts out to our medical examiners. And I think that's it. New stuff next week.
Yeah, and happy belated birthday to our boy Will.
Shouts out Will. Yeah, dude.
He's going to be up in Michigan this weekend, and I am not going to be, even if I could see him, I can't now.
I was going to ask you, I was like, oh, that'd be cool if they actually could link, but yeah, probably not.
Yeah, he's going to be a little ways away from me anyway.
That's the homie. Love you, Will. I told him one of these days we're going to do an interview with him on an episode. I will say this, we are going to occasionally have some guests in the future, so that'll be cool. So I think that's it.
That's going to be all for us today. Stay classy, eat trashy.
Go fast, eat trash. Bye! Really dark way to end. That was a 2-hour recording just for one ad.
Oh god, dude! Just one little fucking gag at the end. Just a little goofer at the end for you.
Just a little goofer.
All right, fuck.